of Secretaries of State.
Welcome back, everybody. Here we are.
Oh, we're back again.
We lost one. Let me see if we
Way
can
to
find
go,
it.
Jacob.
I didn't count.
You
There he
can't
is.
count?
1, 2, 5. We're all here now.
And we have technical opportunities every week. Listen,
It's a live show.
What they call that technical difficulties?
we had a,
I'm the difficult.
well, I wanted to say mental, but the thing is that, I mean, this is the first time I've ventured into doing a panel like this, and it went really well. The phone call was perfect timing.
It really was
to-
good.
Because when you get calls like that, we have a guy that calls, what's his name?
Mr. Wallace.
Mr. Wallace, and he's probably watching, and he calls almost every week.
Hello, Mr. Wallace.
We love you, Wallace,
We do.
but we've gotten him, I think we're starting to get him unstuck. You know, but it's the feedback we got from that guy on how people feel. And I think that's
You
what
know,
we're working towards.
It's discouraging, though,
As a
to hear
group.
people say, I just don't want to vote anymore.
Oh, yeah.
And that's a shame.
Because they
it-
are so discouraged.
Yeah, they
They
are.
are
They are.
discouraged.
But that's what the powerful elites want.
That's
Right,
And
that's
this is,
exactly what
this
they
is
want.
what, this
So
is
you
what
can't-
Hitler
you
did,
can't
this is
go
what
down that
Venezuela
road. You
did.
can't go down that road. You can't give up.
No.
You got to stay encouraged.
I wish I could show you this. We have there were things
bring it to the
that said,
camera?
that
Wouldn't be the
said,
first time.
I'm afraid to hold this too tight.
It's old.
That
It's old.
What
Jim,
they-
let me make a
Yeah,
quick
okay.
statement about
Okay.
voter rolls. Folks, the reason why voter rolls are so important is one of the ways that election corruption happens is with dirty voter rolls.
Oh, yeah.
And that allows, today, the technology that we have is so sophisticated that voter rolls can be manipulated, and from what we've learned in our research over 2 years, without the knowledge of local election officials, state or local officials even. So keeping clean voter rolls is critical to election integrity. And yet we're told by some election officials that we can't
Keep
clean
getting
the
shorter.
voter rolls, and we've heard a variety of excuses about it.
I know.
Well,
I-
it's
I
the,
heard it
you heard
directly.
them? You heard those,
I
Jim?
heard it directly.
We can't do it because of the feds, because of this, because of that.
My answer to the Fed answer was not good. I can't say that on TV, okay?
And yet there are federal and state laws that
We got another
require
caller.
the voter rolls to be cleaned up. And
It's the
Jim
law.
has an interesting newspaper that he'll show
Go-
after the call.
Go ahead, Ronald. Hello?
Did you cut them off?
Hello, yes. I have a question. I just, you were speaking of paper ballots, and something interesting happened. I had watched that hearing they had where Mike Lindell and I think she had spoken of it earlier, came in and explained, you know, all the vulnerabilities to the machines and what have you. And then a bunch of various citizens got up, I mean, looking like from every end of the spectrum, literally, every side of the aisle. And to a person, they all asked for paper ballots and gave their reasons why. And then the clerk of courts got up there, and to a person all said, no, we couldn't have paper ballots.
Exactly true.
And really didn't give any good reason other than there wouldn't be an accurate count, or it wouldn't be possible to do because you don't have the manpower. And
That was
knowing
what I heard.
Canada's been doing it, back when we tried blaming them for the steal, they were, oh, don't blame us, we have paper ballots.
Exactly.
France has been doing it, and I think you guys just listed an example in our country that's doing it. So I called our clerk of court. I was just completely, I couldn't believe what I was seeing, you know? I mean, they work for us, right? So I just couldn't believe it.
Supposedly.
I called the clerk of court, and he was one of the ones that got up there and said, no, we couldn't have them.
Did you happen to hear the one that said her fingers would bleed if she had to? Did you happen to hear the one that said her fingers would bleed if she had to count paper ballots? Did you hear that testimony?
Oh, maybe. I know they had the one with the one, you know, speaking on the side for disability, but you know that's a setup they have everywhere in every case. I've watched it. They're paid activists.
She said that.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. I just couldn't believe. I didn't actually see it when it happened. two later. And so anyway, I immediately called my clerk of court. I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. And I was like, give me, and the only reason he could give me, well, first of all, he could tell I knew some stuff, that I'd been keeping up with things. And then, I was like, but he said, well, and he just kept saying throughout the whole thing, I kept telling him, well, we're just going to have to agree to disagree. I said, no, I don't work for you. You work for me. Why do we have to agree to disagree?
Bravo.
See, they lost
You're
that
doing
idea.
this to work for me.
They've forgotten that.
That's right.
I'm like, no. And then, at the end, he said a few things that made me believe that he really doesn't know what's going on.
No.
And he's believing,
Probably.
what they're giving him, basically, what
Right.
they're telling him.
Right.
And, my neighbors and I, we've dug into some stuff, and we can see that, our federal government, CISA, has implemented all their programs and taken over operational control of the states. And I guess my question is, why? I'm going to get back to the other question, but I got off on this. Why do we need all this cybersecurity protection from the federal government if our machines can't be hacked? We're spending like billions on it.
Good question.
$64 question.
That's a great
Cindy.
question,
And,
caller.
I mean, and they say it all over in their literature.
Yeah.
I mean, there's like programs from now until the end of time because, they own academia. So they've got them all working for them. They have these programs where they go in and work with CISA as part of a scholarship. And then, they indoctrinate them from the get-go. They're even going into 12 through K. I mean, K through 12 on this. But anyway, it's not just college. So when he kept telling me that, then I really got the feeling that he doesn't know. He isn't in on it. He doesn't know, But I don't know where he gets this thing that he's just this. I know they indoctrinated him, but he's a smart man. He's been doing this for a long time. Is that seriously the explanation you're going to give me? That you don't have the manpower to do it, and the count wouldn't be accurate? All you do is you video the people physically counting it, and if you need an audit, you just look back at the video, or you recount the paper. It's just not hard.
Madam, are you an election expert, by the way?
Country in the world. So
Ma'am.
you're telling me that France and Paris can do it, and we can't?
Ma'am, he asked you a question.
Madam, are you an election expert? By what authority are you speaking from common sense about elections? How long have you served in the election industry?
Well, and the other thing I find curious is the majority of Americans, they polled this, and the majority of Americans want paper ballots.
That's right.
But media, no one's talking about it. No one's forcing any of these politicians to explain to us why we can't have what their employer is asking for.
Yeah, it comes down to money.
Power and money.
Well, the thing actually is, if we had,
No, but why does no
Whoa,
one?
whoa.
No, they need to.
We were
explain-
finished,
if someone
ma'am.
just said, you need to explain to us why we can't have what the majority of Americans are asking for.
Well,
and we need a valid reason.
I'll tell you
And
why
no
we
one
can't
asked
have
that
it
question.
is because if we had free and fair elections, then we would have people who were actually elected and not selected. Look at what we have in Washington right now. They couldn't implement their agenda if we had people who were actually elected. So they have to continue the cheat in order to
time
control. Their control. It's an
Right.
agenda, and you know this. It's coming from the top down, and it's not Republicans and Democrats anymore. It's good versus evil. That's the bottom line.
We have selections
Oh, yes, I've
and
been
not
saying that.
And
elections.
until people
There's
realize
like
what
a
we
party fight
actually are
that's between
fighting.
the elites trying to own us and everyday Americans not willing to be owned. But I've been researching the UN for over 5 years. I know what
Good,
they're up to. I know they
good,
implement their
good.
programs on state and local municipalities. They have entire programs
Need
for
to
this.
move on.
That's right.
Isn't the
So I know
UN
what they're
where
up to. And furthermore, if you
caller.
just use common sense, are you telling me that, and they think we're so stupid, and media just, they think we're so stupid, and they expect us to believe that thousands show up for Trump's, regattas, parades, rallies. Even the Amish have their wagon parades for him.
Yeah,
Okay?
yeah.
And Biden couldn't get, 2 to 3 vehicles to show up for his car parade? But they expect us to believe the opposite happened at the polls?
Exactly.
You're in 2020, and I was furious. In 2022, everybody expected that the Republicans would, win in a landslide because they actually did.
Okay, dear, we appreciate your call, but we got some more things. Well, I don't think there's one of us that disagrees with anything.
You're right on the
Not
money,
at
right on the
all.
money.
You're right on the money.
Oh, yes.
Well, I appreciate your time.
fact-
I'm just
Thank you,
so
caller.
irritated. It feels good to be
Yeah,
able to
thanks
get
for
it
your
out.
call,
Yeah.
baby.
Yes, thank you.
2 years later,
All right,
Bye-bye.
bye-bye.
we still have the
And,
same
and
thing.
you see the thing for me with this tonight is to get those calls. To let other people hear, not what Jim Crumling says, not what Randy Rush says, you know, it's to hear people that call in that are not part of this organization and let you know. That's 2 calls we got tonight with people that
The
had very,
the
very
concern's out there.
excellent.
But,
Yeah,
yeah, and
it's
Jim,
just
you
real.
can
It's a
hear
real
the
concern.
frustration in
Yes.
their voices.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that's what's
This
so,
this is not fake news, this is not media hype, this is real.
right.
And this is our future.
And their frustration is what motivates us
Absolutely.
to continue
Absolutely.
seeking the truth and to shed light on what's really going on. And a comment about her, that caller's, what she shared. You got a sense from both of these callers that they believe that we are being ruled by elites who don't listen to us. And these are people who supposedly have been elected.
Exactly.
But I'll give you an example. We're being told in Louisiana that everything's fine, but she brought up CISA. I was told by my friend Christy, don't use a lot of acronyms, okay? Well,
what's
CISA
it
is the
stand
federal
for?
government regulator of electronic voting systems, the cybersecurity
And
and infrastructure security agency. That is under the Department of Homeland Security. How secure are our borders?
DHS.
Well, the same people that are responsible for our borders have their hands in our voting systems. They are the ones who regulate them. And so these callers are frustrated because we want to take control of our elections and return power to the people in the precinct.
In the precinct.
Let us run our elections and count our own votes and report the results after we certify them.
And
The
how
elite-
about our voter rolls? Would we like them back at the registrar's office?
Sure.
Because my registrar, who's
They're not at the
wonderful,
registrar's office anymore?
they've been outsourced to the Secretary of State, really. They don't really do, they're very busy with the process of early voting. That takes up pretty much all their time. And so as far as being able to make sure the registrations are accurate, that's really something that that's really a secondary job at this point.
You see, over the years of doing this, I get calls, on the voting thing. Some of the frustration that you heard tonight, and I think that, I don't know if we want to cover this part soon, but the new organization, NASS, when I saw that, I was just, you see what I did? I printed it
You
out.
did.
And I read through it and I'm going, you gotta be kidding me. Do we want to talk about that or you got something you want to cover?
You mentioned CISA, and the director, Jen Easterly, do you remember her comment that she made?
These are the people, the Biden administration's people who regulate our voting systems, electronic voting systems. This is the director of this federal agency responsible for cybersecurity on our election systems. Listen to what Jen Easterly has to say. This is in paragraph 293 of the Jeff Landry second amended complaint lawsuit filed October 6 in federal court. With specific reference to hotly disputed election integrity issues, which comprise the core political speech, Easterly, the director of CISA, which regulates our voting system, stated that Americans should not be allowed to pick their own facts and make their own decisions about what is true, especially regarding election integrity. Now, our question for Ms. Jen Easterly, who is going to be deposed by Attorney General Jeff Landry. Here's the simple question, audience. If the person regulating electronic voting systems in Louisiana and every other state in the country says Americans should not be allowed to pick their own facts, does Ms. Easterly also believe that Americans should not be able to pick their own candidates through their votes?
I think that's the point she's trying to say.
And that's the type of research that we do and bring to you all so that you can have the full information and not just the cherry-picked information that the elite officials want us to have. And I could go on.
Because
I
of
have
Miss
6 pages of
Easterly's
Miss Easterly.
comments, and she talks about misinformation, and there is a whole video that, Randy, you could probably tell our viewers where they can access that video of certain secretaries of state, etc., talking about the sharing, citizens talking, telling on other citizens when they're spreading misinformation. Now, I don't know about you, but I didn't think this was Nazi Germany. I lived in Germany for 20 years, and it, you know, this is way more nefarious than anything I ever heard that went on over there way back in the day. This is modern day America, and we're talking about surveilling citizens and squashing misinformation. Well, who determines what's misinformation? And on that note, why are we not allowed to hear all sides of a story, and we're only given what the media deems? You know, if we had a free and fair media and honest media, we wouldn't have any problems.
Right. Well, we wouldn't be here. I'd be home with my dear wife, enjoying a glass of wine and maybe reading a book to my grandson.
I mean, all of us have done this. We've started. Our team is. We have been called. We firmly believe that we're all faith-filled, but we've been called because this is a battle. This is a war, and we all, as American citizens, have to stand up tonight, today, tomorrow, now, because America is looking over the precipice into an abyss, and if America falls, there is nowhere else to go. So we have got to do something now. Whatever you can do, stand up, call your local officials, tell them you want paper ballots, because election integrity is the most important issue of all the issues that face us. Because if we don't get this right, nothing else matters.
After 2024, there'll be no more elections.
So
You know,
Christie-
I showed a well, we didn't show it, but we did. Jack Pasevic, you know who that
Yes.
is?
Pasovic.
Pasovic, and she destroyed it again.
That's
okay.
my sister's
Anyways,
favorite.
I got to meet him here in Lafayette, and then he spoke. I met his dad, was sitting in front of me. It was really kind of cool. But I have his speech at the TPUSA convention. I play it about once a week.
It's inspirational.
Yeah.
Just
Very
to charge,
inspirational.
just to get the
Yeah.
trumpet going.
Right.
It's like he said that. His finish pretty close was, he said, not today, not tomorrow,
Right now.
not next month, but
Now,
right now.
Right now.
He says, "Wake up, pray up." That's his every day he posts that.
He
Wake up,
is.
pray
Pray
up.
He is
Because
awesome.
We're at a turning point. We're at a fourth turning.
And Jim, let me say something further about the federal government, the Biden administration. They are funding Secretary of State's offices with federal funds through CISA to hire misinformation specialists to spy on local citizens. How do we know that? The Twitter files and the Jeff Landry lawsuit. We have in our presentation that we did last week here in Lafayette, we have an email from the Secretary of State of Connecticut who is asking for censorship in her state on one of her citizens on information that was gained by the election information security analyst. That's a spy, folks. That's a spy spying on Connecticut citizens. Your tax dollars, the federal government is paying for that, and the secretaries of state have access to these funds. Now, let me be clear. We do not have any evidence to date that in Louisiana these funds have been accessed or any such spies have been hired by our government. state government. But we do have clear, compelling evidence from other states that this program is going on, it's being funded by the feds, and citizens are being spied on.
Do you have that list, Randy, of those that are signed up with this portal in Louisiana?
In Louisiana, we have 8 election officials who are signed up with access to the censorship portal. The Office of the Secretary of State and 7 local parish level election officials are signed up, including, I'll just give a couple of examples off the top of my head. The Clerk of Court of St. Tammany Parish has access to the portal. Now, let me be clear. We have no evidence today that any of those officials, either the Office of the Secretary of State or these 7 local election officials, have submitted a complaint for censorship against the citizen.
Well, I wonder if Jeff Landry's listening to this show tonight. I wonder if he'd want to maybe ask them.
That would be a good question to ask.
I'm not sure, because he's deposing people and
I
finding
did
information
advertise this
out.
on his page.
Right. Well, I would want to know,
I wanna
audience,
know.
you've heard that I personally have been censored by name. I have a question in my mind. Is anybody in my state government involved in censoring me by name? And is there federal money that's being paid in grants to hire people in the state government to censor, to surveil, spy on people like me and censor people like me, a God-fearing, law-abiding, tax-paying citizen for over 42 years, minding my own business and speaking out about the truth. And yet I have been shut down by somebody. And make no mistake about it, people cannot hide because secretaries of state, Twitter files, the House is investigating this, Jeff Landry's investigating this. People can no longer hide from the truth.
Well, Randy, maybe you're over the target. Maybe that's why they might not want people to hear from you.
If everything that we were saying was fabrication, false, and phony, no one would be inviting us to speak.
And nobody has said anything that we've said is untrue. Not one thing.
I shared this information last week in a large setting here in Lafayette, Louisiana, and none of these facts were rebutted. The reason why they can't be is all the information that we're presenting about censorship has been discovered through lawsuits and the actual censorship documents from the federal government to Twitter, from secretaries of state to Twitter, and I'm not even going into the whole COVID side of things, which is blowing up as we speak.
Rand and I were
Remember,
talking before
take
the
the
show.
jab. It's effective and safe. Safe and effective. Safe and effective. Most secure elections. Baseless claims. I don't.
Domestic terrorists.
Yeah.
Conspiracy theorists.
Yeah. You know.
Gee, I've been called all those things.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Rand and I-
folks, you should be, hang on, Andy, I want to make one more point. You should connect the fact that fascists, when they can't argue with your
Oh, yeah.
facts,
Oh, yeah.
they call you names.
Yeah, I got that
Hitler
one.
labeled the Jews. Many of us are being labeled by our own government. Myself, a white, I used to be middle-aged, I'm senior now, white senior citizen male, domestic terrorist, racist, misogynist. They are calling people like me all kinds of names because they cannot refute and
Exactly.
stand against the facts.
Rand and I were talking before the show, and this is an ingrained deep value that he and I both share, and I'm sure everybody else here does also, that when we were raised, when we were younger, we always learned that there's only one truth. And if you tell one truth, it's easy to follow the one truth. Look all the lies out there.
Yes.
Oh,
Look all that's going on. And as Susan Benoit said, they can't refute the truth. It's a fact. It's real. But you can refute the lies, and there's so many of them out there. It's ridiculous, and you just have to sift through them and make sure you're listening to the truth. And
You would,
it means a lot, you know. You
So
can't
it's-
follow lies.
So it's very important for you to get up and call, like they'll encourage you to call your congressman. They really do, want to hear from you. So call your elected officials. You
Dixon.
vote for them. They'll be
Tim?
very much listening to you. There's still time to change people's minds if they hear enough
Hang on a
from
second.
you.
go ahead.
I just want to encourage everybody to pick up the phone or email their elected official, their state, and be very kind. Don't, you do not have to be anything but respectful. We would
Got the call.
always ask that, so.
Go ahead, caller.
Yeah, I got a question. Is there currently any counties or any states that are using paper ballots?
How many states are using them?
Any, is there any?
No, are there any? Are there any states using paper ballots?
There are a number of,
Counties.
there are a number of states in New England that have township control of their elections, and they have been voting and hand counting paper ballots since before the Revolutionary War. And there are other counties throughout the country, some are in Texas and elsewhere, that have always used paper ballots hand counted. And caller, let me relate a story. We've been told that we need all this technology for fast election results. Well, now we can't close out an election for a month. In the election of 1860, November 6, 1860, which I believe that was a divided time in this country's history, Abraham Lincoln was elected and knew that he was elected by midnight on election night. And that was with paper ballots, hand counted, and only a telegraph to transmit the results. And that election was not contested, but the country divided shortly thereafter.
And the one thing about paper ballots, it's a permanent trail. You preserve those ballots, and you'll be able to go back and review it at any time with any question.
You can
These
audit.
electronic ballots, they've been dumping them, and they don't have the trails anymore. It's happened.
Well,
And
they won't
Jim-
give us the cast vote records so that we can see how the election, your election in real time. So in order to be able to get one parish, they said, well, that would cost $2,000. Well, I don't have $2,000 to go see the cast vote records. And San Francisco posts their cast vote records after
Pelosi's area.
every election for free. But
Online.
our Secretary of
Online.
State will charge us,
Of all places.
so they really don't really want us to have what we paid for.
Yeah, Sue,
own them.
Someone's
year
asking
ago-
what a cast vote record is.
A
Maybe we
cast
should
vote-
speak to that
Yeah, a
first.
cast vote record is an electronic date and time stamp, not of the voter's identity, but of their selection. So think about a 7-day early voting period. Every time a voter votes, Monday through Friday, let's say, that vote has a date and time stamp, so you can see the pattern of the votes. And there's a normal pattern for votes electronically. We asked over a year ago for the cast vote records from the Secretary of State for all 64 parishes. These are electronic records that can be easily downloaded to a thumb drive. We got back a quote, a price of about $320,000 to get those electronic records, which we already paid
We
for.
own them.
And so we conclude, once again, I'm back to my wife's story about her wanting to look in my phone. Why can't we have the records that we already paid
We paid for.
with our taxes? We paid the Secretary of State and our local election officials to run these elections and capture those cast vote records. We own them. Why do they want to charge us? Well, the reason why is what Sue said. The average Louisiana citizen can't come up with $2,000, let alone 320,000. So our conclusion is they must not want us to have access to our own records. The logical common sense question that citizens should be asking is, why don't they want to let us look at the cast vote records, which city and county of San Francisco, that's MAGA country, by the way, in case you didn't know. You can go on their election,
Pristine place.
go to the city and county of San Francisco website, go on elections, and all of their election records are there. The logs, the cast vote records, the copies of the ballots, the
all there.
photographs of the ballots,
Wow.
all free right now for the most recent elections and the ones in the past. So our question is, if San Francisco can do it, why is our government preventing us from analyzing these cast vote records? And by the way, we, over a year ago, made a proposition, we offered to our Secretary of State, privately and professionally, to bring in our experts, have some technical experts from inside Louisiana, computer science and electrical engineers with cybersecurity backgrounds, private citizens. We would sit with the Secretary of State's IT people, go through these cast vote records together, and if everything checked out and the patterns were normal, and Christy and Sue Benoit were a part of those conversations, we would go public as a team and say a group of citizens has evaluated this equipment and the cast vote records and everything looked correct. We would say that publicly. But today, what's today? January 18th, 2023?
We still don't have
We
that.
still don't have them. And that's why we've gone public, is it sure doesn't smell right. And we don't feel that we've been treated right as citizens. We've been blocked by the elite, big government bureaucrats.
I have an interesting story. So we were working with our Secretary of State. He worked very closely with us for 2 years. And he even, based on information that we brought him, severed ties with ERIC, which if those of you who don't know what
yeah.
ERIC is,
Yes.
it is ostensibly a voter roll cleaning system that's funded by George Soros. It doesn't actually clean the voter rolls. It culls names from them to cheat. So when we brought the Secretary of State the information, he said, well, I'll do my own due diligence and see what I find. And so he did not like what he found, and he severed ties with ERIC. Well, at the time, 31 states were contracted with ERIC, Louisiana being one. And so when he did that, he was the first, and I think to date, the only, maybe West Virginia, I'm not sure, Randall, maybe
Alabama just announced.
Just announced, but our Secretary of State at the time was the president of the National Association for Secretaries of States, which was NAS, that's the acronym. And so a lot of the secretaries of states around the nation were calling him and saying, oh my gosh, I can't believe you did this. How did you do it? How does it look? What's going to happen now? And they really were looking to him for guidance. And we said at the time, you know, this is great. You can be the standard
He's a
bearer.
hero.
Because he was the president of this organization. You can be the standard bearer for the whole country, and they can follow suit. And so, you know, bringing in all of these national experts to talk to him for 2 years, and he's listening to everything that they're saying, and he's starting to, you know, really shake his head. And so there was one instance where Dr. Douglas Frank, I'm sure a lot of you out there who've been following election integrity know who this rock star is. He is an amazing, he was a
Physicist, Nobel
Nobel
Prize
nominated
statistician, mathematician, musician. He's just a stellar human being. He's a very faith-filled man. And he got called by God to do this work that he's been doing for 2-3 years after the election. And so we brought him in, and our Secretary of State was interested to speak with him. So at my house, in my dining room, the Secretary of State sat with Dr. Douglas Frank for 6 hours. And Dr. Douglas Frank told him everything that he knew about our state and what was going on here and the fraud. That the Secretary of State, I don't know if he has anything to do with it or anything. I'm not accusing him or anyone. I know in this state we have best people, best practices. We do have good practices in Louisiana. But interestingly enough, Dr. Frank asked our Secretary of State's permission to have a white hat hacker try to hack into our election code in real time. And our Secretary of State granted him permission.
Our election system,
Election system, sorry, I don't know what did I say?
election code.
Sorry, election system. So permission was given and the hacker was successful. At which point our Secretary of State.
How long did it take for him to hack into the system?
I don't know, a few minutes, not long at all. In fact, it was shocking. It was shocking to me because I'm not a data analyst or anybody who knows anything about computers, but the speed with which this happened was breathtaking. At which point our Secretary of State threw his hands up in the air, put his, and said, "Oh my gosh, I guess that's what I needed to hear." So, I mean, we thought he's going to continue to work with us, and because he had been up until this time, he didn't close the door on us. He was receptive. Well, fast forward to October of this past year, and we hear that he is going around the state now saying that there's no election fraud in Louisiana, which he had stopped saying for a while. So we're very perplexed
Hang on a minute.
as to why
Hello?
there's
Yeah,
a
hang on.
change in
Okay.
in his stance when he was receptive and listening, and he saw what the saw what the experts were saying about fraud and how there are external players and things, and I mean he knows every way
So
by
you s-
which the cheat can happen here, and there's no fraud in our state.
You still
again.
have questions with no answers.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, I don't know how you can say there's no fraud when you've heard and you've seen. I just don't know.
Go ahead, caller.
Hi, this is John Swisher from WGSO Radio New Orleans. I'm Martha Huckabee's colleague, and how you doing, Randy?
Hey, John, how are you?
Great. I just wanted to say shortly. When Martha and I went canvassing Ascension Parish, we found one open lot with no buildings that had registered 20 registered voters, and there was another shack that habitable house that hasn't been habited in 20 years that had another 20 registered voters. You remember that?
Yeah, I remember that, John, and that's part of what Christie's alluding to. We have election officials going around the state saying that our voter rolls are accurate, 99.some%.
How can
And,
they say
and
that?
you and 55 other Louisiana citizens from 14 parishes canvassed 2,000 voters, and we found significant problems and anomalies and potentially illegal and ineligible voters. And so we appreciate you joining us for that. And I can take this opportunity to say that we will be doing more canvassing soon in a parish near you.
Yes, yes.
I like
I
that.
can't wait to do Orleans Parish.
Yeah,
Oh, that's
yeah.
gonna be
It,
fun.
it could happen in '23.
Yeah.
Well, if we can clean up voter rolls in 2010, we surely
And
can do
the
it
bench
today.
is a conservative parish. Just imagine when we hit Orleans Parish.
That's right.
Oh, I would love to see that.
Hey, John, Jim has an interesting newspaper.
Oh.
We have election
yeah.
officials telling us now that they can't clean up the voter rolls for a variety of excuses. But I think Andy found this newspaper in his burn pile, and he gave it to Jim.
I used newspapers to light my charcoal, and I was
God
barbecuing
has a
with the
sense of
family
It's
this
from
weekend. I found
2010,
this.
John,
It's an Opelousas newspaper from December of 2010.
and it says Louisiana voter rolls to be updated.
And read the second line there, inactive.
Inactive names will be stricken from the registration.
It's the law.
It's
They're
the
doing
law.
their
15 years
job.
later.
And John, the only
Nobody likes that.
reason that was dated and being done in 2010 was because it started in 2006, but then Katrina hit. So they suspended it for 4 years and then picked it up again as 2010 and said that either people are gone and not coming back or they're coming back and they're settled. So we can do it. It's just a matter of wanting to do it.
work.
It's over, Dr. Frey showed that based on the census, our voter rolls in the 65 and older age range, were at 100, over 100% registration
In a variety of parishes.
in a variety of
And John,
areas.
what's even more shocking about that analysis is voter turnout between age 70 and 90 in almost every parish is 95% plus voter turnout, age 70 to 90 plus.
You gotta laugh.
And yet
People crying.
we're being told that there's nothing to see here.
That's right.
And I think our
Well,
elite,
how can our people out there listening, how can they check to make sure that their parents, their elderly parents, haven't had their identity stolen, their voice stolen? How
Sure.
can they do that?
Both
Yeah.
of my parents are deceased, and they're still registered. They're still on the voter rolls.
yeah, for our listeners out there, John,
Since 2012, she's still on the road.
Wow.
yeah, they passed when, 2012?
My baby sister is deceased 2012, and she's still on the voter roll.
Right. And the question is why? Why do we have a deceased person on the roll? And it would be interesting to learn if they have voted, because if your dear sister has a registered vote after 2012, it suggests strongly that there is identity theft and illegal voting occurring.
It's elder abuse.
So it's elder abuse, and one of the things that we encourage the audience to do, if you have an older mom or dad, you owe it to yourself to check their registration at GoVote, and also if they're an absentee voter, if they have registered to absentee vote, you can check their absentee voting record to see, for example, if they have Alzheimer's and they're unable to vote, you should be checking to see if someone has voted for them, because we're seeing that in other states, and we have some evidence here in Louisiana that's not conclusive, but it at least gives us concern that elders are being abused and their identities are being stolen and their votes are being taken from them. So check your senior parents or relatives, go to GoVote, look up their voter registration, and then check their absentee voter status. And that'll show you multiple election years of whether they have in fact voted, and especially those who are mentally incapacitated.
Are you coming to the thing Friday in Metairie for Martha's Club?
I'll be there.
And our candidate for Secretary of State is going to be there too. I'm not going to. I'm making no bones. I'm going with Brandon. Let's go, Brandon.
Let's go, Brandon.
He's also gonna be at my Acadiana Patriots meeting, this coming Tuesday.
The thing I love about Brandon Trosclair is he is a proven fighter. He stood up to the Biden administration, and for his employees at his grocery stores, he fought OSHA's mandate to have them vaccinated because he knew he would lose employees that didn't want to get the jab. And so he stood up and he won his case, and he overturned the vaccine mandates for the employees of the country.
All the way to
So,
the Supreme
all
Court.
the way to
As
the
long as
Supreme
they're-
Court.
I
So,
love shopping his store.
yeah.
I wish he had more stores across the lake.
He's we the people. He is one of us, and he is fighting for us. And he wants a
His
paper ballot
grandfather
system. He
Was a
wants.
longtime mayor of
Another
Bletcher,
caller.
Momo Trosclair.
Can I
He was
answer?
Democrat in name only, but he governed conservatively.
Interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, well, we got another one
Thanks,
trying to
John.
call
Thank
in.
you, John.
Thanks for calling.
Democratic
Friday,
Kennedy
buddy.
area.
All right, thank you. Uh-oh, you went away.
You lose
There
it.
we go. Go ahead, caller.
Yes, I wanted to call in and talk about the LFRW letter that was sent out to its members. I'm a member of the LFRW, and I received the email, and quite frankly, I was appalled by the letter. And I was curious to know if what the reaction was, if y'all knew the reaction of a lot of the members, because I've gotten, most people I've talked to feel the same way I do, but I have heard a few people say they heard that, you know, the board agreed or, you know, something like that. So I'm just curious, what is the general consensus about that letter?
I've
And
already gotten in enough trouble.
Caller, that's a great question. This is Randy Russ, by the way, and I believe that my name is the very first name on that letter.
You're the topic.
It's the top of the
Or the top
list,
dog.
and I can give you, I can just share my story of what happened to me in Lafayette last Wednesday night. John Scanlon and I are the main speakers for our election integrity movement. We only go where we're invited. We have no budget. We have no 501c3. We're both retired. We fund all of our work out of our own pockets. We're not running for office. I said this before on this show. So I was invited to speak at the Fleur-de-Lis Republican Women's Club. And it was the strangest speaking engagement I've ever experienced. And keep in mind that I've spoken to thousands of people in classrooms, in boardrooms, in employee meetings, in community meetings, in church, preaching. I've taught and spoken on 3 continents over 42 years. And that experience was very odd. Upon arrival, the president and the president-elect of the club asked to speak to me, and they had a copy of the letter in their hand, and they told me that the bylaws were very strict and that I was not to say anything about the Secretary of State that would be negative. And I said, well, I don't mean to cause any trouble. If you would like, I'll just turn around and go home, no harm, no foul. So I offered not to speak that night, realizing that this letter was out there naming me personally and telling clubs not to invite me. And so I listened to their concerns, and they said, oh no, we want you to speak. So I said, well, how about this? I'll show you the presentation that I prepared. It's on the topic of censorship. So I knelt down on the floor in front of a little cocktail table. The 2 ladies were in the chairs next to it. And I went through my slides. And I said, there's only one slide, which is totally factual, that says that the Secretary of State's office and 7 election officials are members of the censorship portal identified by Attorney General Jeff Landry. And let me be clear, we have no evidence today that any of them have filed a complaint to censor any Louisiana citizens. So I said, is there anything here that's objectionable? And they said, no, go ahead and proceed. So then I went into the large ballroom there at the Petroleum Club in Lafayette. And I was told that I had 25 minutes to speak by a gentleman, I don't know who he was, and he had a card on a tongue depressor with 2 minutes on it, and then a blank card. He said, when the blank card comes up, you're to stop. And unbeknownst to me, because I'm really not politically involved, I don't really know all the Republican politics stuff. 3 seats down from me is the author of that letter. For some reason, and I've been at many head tables in my 42 years of speaking, usually it's common courtesy and protocol that all the persons sitting at the head table are introduced to each other, because you don't assume that we all know each other. Well, neither the president of the club nor the president-elect introduced me to this person. I believe her name is Robbie Dwyer or something like that, who wrote the letter. So my senses started coming up that something's not quite right here. So then,
I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed as a Republican woman.
So then, I didn't feel like I didn't feel like the guest speaker. I feel like I had done something wrong and that I wasn't welcome there. So then, right before I was to speak, 4 senior team members of the Secretary of State's office came in the room and went to the back where the restrooms were. And I know all of them because, as we've said on this program, we've worked very closely with them for many months now. So I went up and introduced or greeted Brad Manuel, the IT manager, and said, "Hey, Brad, how you doing? How's everything going?" And he said, "I'm really busy." And then I turned to Mr. Tobler. Brad is the IT manager. Mr. John Tobler is the director of communications. And I said, hey, Mr. Tobler, how are you? Welcome. I'm really glad you're here. And he made an odd comment in a kind of condescending way. Mr. Tobler said, "Are you really sure you're glad I'm here?" And I said, "Well, Mr. Tobler, I've spoken to some pretty tough groups over my lengthy career, and I'm sure everything will be okay." So then I went back to the front table, and those 4 folks were ushered to the very front, seated right in front of me.
I think they removed some people and asked them to go to the back, the ones that had gotten there first. They asked those people to get out of their chairs, paying members, and to put the Secretary of State's.
So the
staffers.
Secretary of State's senior team was seated within 10 feet of where I was standing to make the presentation. During the middle of the presentation, there was a lady that had a panic attack, and I'm not saying anything. I wish her well. I hope that she's okay. But at about the 10-minute mark, this disruption happened. If it had been an isolated thing, I wouldn't have thought anything about it. But I was talking to Sue Benoit, who was there, and I said, "Sue, given everything else that happened that night, does that seem kind of odd that exactly halfway through my remarks, I was kind of shut down by this incident?" And she said, "Yeah, something's not quite right." And then at the end, guest speakers are usually invited, and there's a time at the end for the audience to ask questions. Well, at the end of my remarks, one of I think the new president took the microphone and went over to the Secretary of State's senior team, had them stand up, and gave them the microphone. So the audience was not allowed to ask any questions of me, and I was not allowed to respond or react to anything.
Wow.
And the Secretary of State's team took up, I'm going to guess, 20 plus minutes. In my impression, was they were running the clock out because they didn't want me to speak anymore. And that's just my story. And, I could be wrong about some of this, but there were 80 to 90 people who witnessed what I'm sharing with you, and 2 of them are sitting right here next to me. And so I felt really bad about the experience. It was one of the most ungracious and unwelcoming environments I've ever been in. And if I was a member of that group, I would be embarrassed that an invited guest who offered to leave before the meeting, not to disrupt anything, that an invited guest was treated so poorly. And my topic was censorship.
Go ahead.
We only got a minute left,
Go
ma'am.
ahead, speak.
So
Yeah, I was gonna say, tell Randy that I apologize on behalf of the Republican women. My first thought was, I'm horrified by how ungracious he was treated, and
Okay.
that's not what we're about. Yeah,
You
All
were
right.
there.
Thank
were
you
there.
for the call.
thank you.
I
She must have
I
been
appreciate all y'all coming. I know y'all drove over from Baton Rouge, and
Oh,
we're gonna do this
fast,
again.
Jim. We'll have
Yeah,
to
we'll
do it
come back
again.
anytime,
We're
Jim.
gonna
Yeah,
do
there's
this
something
again.
always breaking every
So,
week.
Thank you, Jim. We
It's-
appreciate
it's,
you having us on.
I mean,
Thank you for
I
watching.
watched this group
Thank
for
y'all
about
so
6
much.
months. you
Shout
know,
out to my
and
family.
I heard
Yeah.
some things, but we're gonna do this again, and it's just gonna be fun. Look, God bless all of you, the callers and the people that took the time to watch.
Thank you.